Not.
I'm not aware of anything reaching the scale of our mining investment.
There are those opportunities, like my colleague had
Opportunities,
mentioned,
certainly.
electricity generation and so on.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Arya, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are some well-intentioned NGOs in Canada who advocate on behalf of the people of Ecuador. Not all people, obviously the government and the majority of the people of Ecuador welcome foreign trade agreements. Just to give a parallel example, a couple of hundred people in Quebec, led by Greenpeace, protested against the Northvolt $7 billion investment in Quebec, employing 3,000 people to manufacture batteries. Based on that, if the people in Sweden advocate to their government that the people of Canada are protesting, so let's not have trade or investment in Canada. So we have to understand that the global south is changing. I know we mentioned about the human rights, gender equality issues, and other social issues. I hope that we know that we can't, Canada as a developed country, we can't be seen to be lecturing or preaching. I think we have to use our words carefully. And we have to be more prudent and pragmatic. However, the well-intentioned arguments against Canadian business, against Canadian interest, against the free trade agreement that we intend to have with Ecuador, I think, in my view, that's a bit problematic. Canadian, when Canadian investments or any investment go to a country like Ecuador, though it's a middle-income country, it is not a poor country like many countries in Asia and Africa. Still, the investments that go in, Canada being the largest investor there, foreign investor, it creates economic development opportunity. It creates jobs for Ecuadorian people. It creates infrastructure. It can be roads, power generation plants, hospitals, schools. So those are the kind of things, the multiplier effect, the positive multiplier effects of the investment that goes in there should also be considered. And talking of considerations, you did mention that the economist did measure the benefits that this agreement can bring into Canada, which apparently is a bit modest. Did that economist calculate the lost opportunity cost, economic opportunity cost, by not having a trade agreement, free trade agreement, wherein our competitors, take the example of supplying lentils or wheat, our competitors having a free trade agreement causing potential loss to Canadian trade with Ecuador?
Thank you very much for the question. I think that is an important element of an economic model, is to consider the opportunity costs. I'm just not sure if ours does that. I'm not saying it does or doesn't. I don't know. I would have to check with our chief economist's office to answer your question more fully, and I'm happy to do that.
My only suggestion or comment, I'm sure as very experienced negotiators, trade negotiators, who have successfully conducted very beneficial trade agreements across the countries in the world with Canada. My only thing is that let's be pragmatic when we have a free trade agreement. The environmental chapter is important because that is one of our objective. But as we know that we are just one side of the table, one partner in the two people at the table. We are only one of us. So let's also give due consideration to the interest of Canada, Canadian economic interest, Canadian trade interest. At the end of the day, our prosperity that we enjoy today is only due to the international trade, which contributes to about 67% of our GDP. So let's not forget that big picture in mind when we have agreements, negotiations with small markets or big markets, etc. With my limited time, I just want to ask questions. It was touched upon by my colleague. With free trade agreement with Ecuador, will it create a base for Canadian companies to explore further into the region where we don't have free trade agreement? Can Ecuador act as a base to open doors or, to channel our exports, our trade to other countries in the region?
Thank you for the question. I think it absolutely can. It's one of the areas that certainly we see through our experience and when we see what happens with an FTA after X number of years being in place is that you establish your linkages with companies, whether it's enhanced supply chains or whether it's finished products. And then depending on the country and how they're set up, and it strikes me that in this case, Ecuador is well placed within the context of South America to do that, just as you outlined. But we'll have to see, frankly. I'm not like that. Also depends kind of on their economy, how they're set up, what their companies are doing, and the transportation network, et cetera. But it certainly strikes me that is certainly quite possible.
Thank you very much. Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci. On sait qu'il y a eu des scandales entourant les comportements des minières qui souvent vont finalement être militarisés. Il va y avoir des altercations avec les populations autochtones. On en a parlé un petit peu plus tôt. Comment s'assurer qu'il y ait des mesures de...
Translation problem again. Can we try it again? Mr.
On y va?
Savard-Tremblay,
Oui,
do you want to
parfait.
start again?
Est-ce que c'est bon,
I don't
l'interprétation?
know, try it. If you could start again, Mr.
Oui, alors je repose ma question. On sait qu'il y a des scandales en...
Not translate.
Is it working now?
Now it's working. Thank you very much.
La troisième sera la bonne. Alors, on sait qu'il y a
Third time lucky. We know that there are scandals about the mines in many countries, not just in Ecuador. There will be militarization. There will be altercations between the local population, especially the native ones. How can we make sure that there will be proper measures of overseeing the Canadian companies? The ambassador of Ecuador said that it could increase the mining. How are we going to see that human rights will be respected in these agreements?
Well, I think excellent question to begin. From our perspective, we think the free trade agreement with robust provisions on labor and the environment, et cetera, will be a net benefit. We're also always looking to understand what complementary initiatives we can undertake, including with respect to our broader responsible business conduct regime in Canada, and also initiatives in the bilateral relationship that would be supportive to the trade agreement. And in that regard, we welcome feedback from this committee on the kinds of things that we should be looking at more holistically in the relationship to support the free trade agreement.
Est-ce qu'on peut attendre quelque chose d'un peu plus robuste, justement? Vous parlez de chapitre.
Can we expect something more robust? In the last agreement, we insisted on principles, but there was no mechanism. Can we expect something supplementary this time?
Well, what we are doing right now is we're doing the policy work on the various chapters that we are considering for proposal, including a built-up, dedicated, responsible business conduct chapter. We would welcome feedback from you and the committee on the kinds of things that would be of interest in that regard. I'll also say that we're looking at, again, complementary initiatives to support our broader objectives in the relationship.
Mais nous en prenons bonne note.
Thank you very much.
We take notice of it.
Mr. Cannings for 2.5 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to follow up with, I guess, a kind of similar question. And that is, we've heard that Canada's Ecuador's biggest trading partner, most of that is in mining. And we have, I think, admirable chapters on rights of Indigenous peoples, on the environment, et cetera. And apparently there are dispute mechanisms that would go along with those chapters that Canada could complain if Ecuador is not abiding by them. I'm just wondering, because we have a situation here where it seems most of the human rights violations, most of the environmental problems that the Ecuadorians are concerned about are being caused by Canadian mining companies that are being protected by an ISDS provision. Who makes those complaints and how are they adjudicated? Because it just seems that we're working at cross purposes here. And just so I can get it in before my time's up, would one of these things that might go along with it be a stronger ombudsperson for responsible enterprise in Canada that has the powers to get documents, get witnesses to testify, because that's what she said to this committee she needed to make the changes necessary.
Well, on that, I will just note that, the question pertains to a much broader global responsible business conduct regime in Canada. At present, Canada has measures and frameworks in place to encourage responsible business conduct by Canadian companies active abroad. The government has 2 non-judicial dispute settlement mechanisms, our National Contact Point for Responsible Business Conduct and the Canadian Ombudsperson for Responsible Enterprise. Also notable, Canada's Corruption of Foreign Officials Act, which continues to help ensuring that Canadian businesses are engaging responsibly in their engagement with foreign public officials. As regards the particular FTA, we're working on a chapter, would welcome feedback on the kinds of things that would go on that chapter. But I'll also say that we have a number of other initiatives underway outside of the FTA that are of note. Just next week, a project will begin where a Canadian international development company will be providing advice and assistance to the Ecuadorian government in the development of a free, prior, and informed consent law. I think that's a very net positive opportunity for Canada to make a positive contribution to these issues in Ecuador, and one that I think complements the free trade agreement.
Thank you very much. Mr. Martel for 5 minutes, please.
Excusez-moi. Ma question est pour monsieur.
My question is to Mr. Bouchard. Mr. Bouchard,
En date de l'année 2022, le blé
in 2022, 76% of those exports to Ecuador. Is it possible to hear about the contribution to get more Canadian jobs? Thank you for the question, but just to clarify, as to we deal with the rights of workers, so we don't deal with anything else in this chapter. Thank you for the question.
You'd like to understand how many jobs were created based on the amount of exports? Did I catch that correctly? Est-ce que j'ai bien compris la question comme ça?
C'est que c'est surtout en date de 2022.
In 2022, 76% of the exports, it came mostly from Alberta and Saskatchewan. Is it to know how more Canadian jobs would be created in those 2 sectors?
Thank you for the question and the clarification. I appreciate that. So our economic model, to the best of my knowledge, does not necessarily equate jobs created with the amount of new exports, I think. So opportunities to access new markets will certainly create more production and more exports. I think especially our agriculture system on the prairies is certainly based around exports. And so if we